We all know the old cliche, don't judge a book by its cover. In fantasy sports, it's easy to do the exact opposite, abiding by the overall results, those basic numbers laced in front of us. They're a concrete overview of a whole year's worth of player performance, and we're tasked with making a critical decision under the harrowing pressure of a draft clock. It's impossible that we consider advanced statistics when you only have a minute and change to choose between a true championship-winning bat and an overhyped bust waiting to happen. However, savvy owners in fantasy baseball have the advantage of having pulled pages upon pages of data days, weeks, or even months before draft day, articles swimming in graphs and tables that tell a different story than the surface stats pressed beside the edges of headshots on ESPN.com. In today's video, that different story I'm alluding to is a stark contrast between two halves. The rain-soaked, modest-weathered struggles of the first 90 games of the 2018 season and the scorching hot summer nights characterizing the final 70. I'll be covering hitters who saw a jump in OPS of at least 100 points between mid-July and the end of the 2018 season. There were a couple others who were close to fitting the criteria, so I added them briefly since they offered compelling enough data to consider. Sometimes chasing the glories of a dominant second half gives you a leg up in redraft leagues where undervalued players bolster your roster exponentially. That being said, not all stories have happy endings, so heed my advice right now when I tell you to consider some of the following players and some of the following data with a grain of salt. Let's begin.
In the air, right center field, hit well, that's back there. This one is gonna fly! 2 on, 2 outs. And the 1-1 is driven deep right field. And this one's gonna fly out of here! At one point. And there's Yelich, deep to right. And this one is gone! Christian Yelich has done it again!
Yelich is only a couple months removed from winning the National League MVP award, and if you owned him last year and read the title of this video with even a shred of curiosity, then you knew I had to talk about his second half. Unlike mostly everyone else on my list, Yelich was actually pretty good in his first half of baseball with his new team, hitting .292, scoring 60 runs, and getting on base at a rate well above average. The Brew Crew had found their star outfielder who'd solidify the top of their lineup, but apparently that wasn't enough for Yelich, who barely bonds his way through the summer with second half numbers we may never see again for a very long time. A .367 batting average, a .402 isolated power, a 1200 OPS, and a .770 slugging percentage. To put that last bit into perspective, the league average on base plus slugging percentage this season was .728. He nearly averaged more than 3 times as many total bases per game than the rest of the major leagues. For the sake of this video, he'll be the benchmark of my research because why not? Amazingly enough, Yelich's skills hardly improved between his first and second halves of the season. Here's what I did to make this discovery. Using BaseballSavant.com, I tabled all calculated batted balls that weren't poorly hit, which only includes barrels, flares, burners, and solid contact, of course. His average exit velocity on those only went up 2 points between his first and second halves of the season, from 98.6 to 106 miles per hour. An interesting fact considering that latter mark was higher than that of 3 of the most proficient power hitters in the game. Mix this with a hard hit rate over 50% after the All-Star break and chart data suggesting an elevated launch angle was a culprit behind a fluky but still remarkable 48.1% home run per fly ball rate, and we end up with a masterful end to a glorious debut in a new setting. Yelich was legitimately every bit as good as the hype surrounding his award-winning push, and if he somehow winds up falling towards the second round or the end of the second round of draft tables, I'd highly recommend gambling on his power and enjoying the ride. Stay tuned for a much more in-depth look at Yelich's awesome 2018 season later on as we approach spring training. Even if you owned Hunter Renfroe last season, you probably forgot the man exists, but doing so at this juncture would be a huge mistake. Despite his average exit velocity falling off just a tad after the All-Star break, Renfroe made considerable improvements in virtually every other area of performance. For starters, he took to having more formidable at-bats, particularly against right-handed pitching, his Achilles heel. Here are some heat maps of both his swing and whiff percentages from 2017. Notice the red on the outer halves of both heat maps. That tells us Renfroe has a tendency for chasing bad balls and breaking pitches diving off of the plate. Here are a couple of heat maps from this past season with way more cold spots on the outer halves. Renfroe made a conscious effort to lay off more pitches away and focus squarely on the inside half of the plate and do it with power, as demonstrated with this heat map covering his damage against right-handed pitching. He also solved their fastballs last season with a 70-point boost in batting average and a slugging percentage chasing .500 against the pitch. This segues into what could be considered a pretty big and really important breakthrough for him: overall success against righties. In 493 career plate appearances versus right-handed pitching prior to the 2018 All-Star Game, Renfroe hit just .219 with a .687 OPS and a .292 weighted on base average. From July 20th through the end of September 2018, he hit .257 against them with a .571 slugging percentage, a .314 isolated power, and a .356 weighted on base average, all with a batting average on balls in play over 40 points below the league average.
I got your StatCast. Break out the launch angle. Break out the exit velocity.
As a result, his 44.6% hard hit rate was 13th in all of baseball throughout the second half, and his .288 isolated power placed him firmly among the top 10 of all qualified hitters. Guess who also qualified in that list and finished just one spot higher? Randal Grichuk. Like Renfroe, Grichuk has always displayed jaw-dropping power and has always struggled to consistently tap into it for a number of reasons. Unfortunately, it's much harder to indicate what exactly led to his .260 second half batting average and .844 second half OPS against right-handed pitching. His true skills didn't improve all that much, save for him displaying much more success against pitches up above the waist. He still has a serious problem chasing way too many pitches in general, and despite a .280 batting clip and an average launch angle of over 20 degrees after the All-Star break, the power average combo only truly came together for 1 month in that time frame, last August when he hit .316 and slugged .551. On the other hand, Marwin Gonzalez's 2018 season, despite being an overall disappointing follow-up to an out-of-nowhere 2017 campaign, has some pretty neat positives if you squint hard enough at him. Sure, if we remove his .606 slugging percentage and .303 isolated power from August, there would be hardly any reason at all to include him in this video, but there's still some hope for his future prospects. His average exit velocity went up nearly 5 points in the second half, and his average fly ball distance on barrels, flares, burners, and solid contact went up by 40 feet. That's never a coincidence. An article by the Sports Daily acknowledged this, pointing out noticeable increases in his hard hit rate, swing rate on pitches in the strike zone, and contact rate on pitches in the strike zone. What's strange is how heat maps on Brooks Baseball say otherwise, as they suggest his slugging percentage on fly balls fell way off over the second half. Could both factors be correlated? Did bad luck lead to Gonzalez's .738 OPS and .273 BABIP in September, a month in which his expected weighted on base average was over .450 and his average exit velocity was only about a half point lower than Christian Yelich's? There are certain advanced metrics behind Gonzalez's second half saying you should buy, and although his multi-positional flexibility appears a bit more valuable in real life than it does in fantasy, I like him as a late round scoop to protect your middle infield in case of an injury or positional ineptitude. Returning from surgery for his torn left shoulder, Michael Conforto struggled throughout his first 85 games of the season, and it became pretty easy to write him off for the year considering the nature of his health. Then he rediscovered his power, and despite a .409 slugging and .734 OPS in August, Conforto absolutely erupted by the dawn of September. Diving back into the StatCast search engine, it appears his late blooming should have been anticipated. Like with Yelich, I chose to calculate his second half average exit velocity solely by barrels, flares, burners, and solid contact. That's not so easy to say all the time, so for the sake of brevity, let's call this the BFC formula, a measurement of the quality of a hitter's best forms of contact. Compared to Yelich and a few other players I've mentioned earlier, Conforto's not far behind in this regard, with an average exit velocity of 97.9 miles per hour. That's 2 miles per hour faster than his first half mark, and his launch angle over the second half, despite being a little bit lower than in the first, was still a healthy 16.8 degrees, almost a full point above that of JD Martinez, who had a paltry .605 slugging percentage over his final 58 games of the season. In many ways, Conforto improved pretty substantially over the summer. For starters, he was tearing lefties apart like he was a season ago, slugging .551 against them with a 144 rated runs created plus. Then there's this. He totally turned his success around versus fastballs, sliders, and curveballs with ISO marks as high as .407 against 3 of the most frequented pitches in all of baseball. And look at the stark contrast in whiff rates between the first and second halves. With this shoulder back to 100%, Conforto should be an absolute steal in every league he's available.
AI powered by AWS will certainly prove that point, and here's one that will prove the point. Right back into center field and out of here. Fans' 21st home run of the year.
Ditto for Tommy Pham, despite his draft stock being much higher in comparison. This guy punished baseballs once the calendar flipped to July. His overall average exit velocity was a full 2 points faster than Yelich's mark at 93.5 miles per hour. Even more remarkable is how drastically he improved against breaking balls and changeups. Look at the precipitous drop in whiffs per swing and the positive effect it had on his batting average, slugging percentage, and isolated power. Maintaining a very solid walk per strikeout ratio, Pham closed out his season with a surreal ferocity, and considering how he managed to put up a post-All-Star break OPS over 1,000 despite ongoing groin and finger injuries, he should be one of the most desirable players to own in 2019 with his ailments far behind him. Jackie Bradley Jr., on the other hand, is probably a name many people will ignore on draft day, but I'm here with a flurry of evidence to tell you not to do that. There's so much I could lead with here, but I'm going to start with a visual comparison. This is Bradley Jr. batting in just the second game of the regular season back in March. This is him in Game 3 of the ALCS back in October. You may not be able to see it at first, and for me it took quite a while to figure it out, but he's taking 2 drastically different swings here. In the Rays game, he's flying wide open. Before hacking at the baseball, he winds up like a pitcher. He twists his back towards the mound enough so you could almost spell out his entire jersey, and on the point of contact, he sort of jerks his body around without any linearity. Not even Bradley himself can find a valid excuse for this. He just looks uncomfortable here. Regular golfers have better swing paths than this. Fast forward back to October, and with only a few subtleties, he looks a lot more confident. His body stays in one place, centering his power, allowing for a more streamlined, consistent swing, and a much better follow-through. The rotation here doesn't sway like it did in March. Bradley looks and probably feels like he knows what's going to happen next.
Bradley Jr., a high fly ball to right. Reddick is at the wall, can only watch a grand slam. Jackie Bradley Jr.
Thanks to help from Red Sox hitting coach Tim Hires and teammate JD Martinez, Bradley spent some time mid-season working out some kinks, which led to his dominant postseason performance, but not before raking in the numbers over the summer. Slugging .487 with a .352 weighted on base over 56 second-half games, Bradley Jr. let his new swing take him all the way to a World Series championship. By StatCast measurements, his average launch angle saw an increase of 3 degrees over the second half, with an average exit velocity a full point higher than Mike Trout's. You think that sort of comparison is exaggerating the point? Take a look at the radial charts for both hitters in that time frame. They're virtually one and the same. Aledmys Diaz has way too much competition in his everyday position to be anything more than a sneaky late round pick, but I like him in that capacity in virtually every league format. Despite negligible improvements to his walk rate, Diaz catapulted its average launch angle 5 points after the All-Star break to 16.4 degrees, justifying the 6-point increase in fly ball rate and the 130-point increase in slugging percentage. Using my BFC formula, I found that his average distance in fly balls went up 16 points over the summer, and if I remove pop-ups and line drives, it shoots up to a very healthy average of 365 feet, just 12 feet shorter than that of Mike Trout. Thanks in part to a red-hot month of June, Stephen Piscotty fails to meet the criteria for this video, but his OPS jumped 91 points between the first and the second half, and sandwiched between a still decent 206 ISO in August on marks of 323 in July and 345 in September, a month in which he slugged 655 with a weighted on base of 434 and a weighted runs created plus of 182. According to my BFC formula, his average fly ball distance sits at 391 feet. That's a mere 5 feet short of teammate Chris Davis's 396 foot mark, and we all know what he's capable of with a baseball bat.
Drilled in the air to deep left center field. That ball's hit a ton, and it's way back and gone.
His BFC weighted average exit velocity trails Yelich's mark by only a couple miles per hour, and his BFC weighted average launch angle beats Yelich's with a mark of 18.8 degrees.
Piscotty too high, cement mixer coming right down Broadway, and you can see it, foot down, those eyes lined up.
Piscotty is basking in the fly ball revolution, and although his swing-happy approach will depress his chances of being a top 15 outfielder, I love his transformation into a potent power hitter, and I think he'll be absolutely dangerous in 2019. Tommy Pham wasn't the only Tampa Bay Ray who blossomed in the second half of 2018. There are two other good reasons why the team finished the year as the 6th best offense in all of baseball after the All-Star break: Willy Adames and Joey Wendle. Willy Adames pulled a complete 180 turnaround in the second half, struggling through July before making a universal adjustment to Major League pitching in August. Adames's average exit velocity in the first half sat at just 82.9 miles per hour. The result was a weighted on base average of 264 and an OPS just barely scraping past 600. After talking with teammate Matt Duffy and hitting coach Chad Mottola, Adames went back to the drawing board and remixed his entire approach at the plate. In the past, he would awkwardly pounce at the baseball and disrupt his balance. His timing was all over the place, and the result was consistently weak contact and a smattering of strikeouts. After changing his swing, Adames found his groove and absolutely took off. A slightly more hunched over stance became complemented with a clean, simple swing path that allowed him to do considerably more damage than before. His second half average exit velocity jumped up to 88.1 miles per hour, his weighted on base and slugging saw substantial improvements, and his weighted runs created plus nearly doubled. He had the 8th best OPS among qualified shortstops in the second half, with the 9th best walk per strikeout ratio. There are still some red flags in his game, with a strikeout rate teetering on 30% and a BABIP over 400 during his hot stretch, but at 23 years old with some serious 20-homer pop and a pretty rock-solid eye for the strike zone, Adames is a great upside play in the later rounds and a must-draft in all 16 team and AL-only leagues. Joey Wendle's second half was so awesome, not a single top 300 second baseman reached its dizzying heights. Riding a contact rate over 80%, Wendle relied on a 3-point increase in average launch angle to bolster both his isolated power and weighted on base by over 50 points. That being said, his average exit velocity still sat around 87 miles per hour in this stretch, which only goes up 7 points using my BFC formula. So he still carries a look of a doubles hitter who can hit 300, but doesn't stand much of a chance slugging 500 over the course of a full season. In this day and age, that only plays if he's scoring runs by the boatload, but Wendle is usually slotted as a run producer in the middle of the Rays lineup. He's a great bet to provide consistent value in leagues that count batting average and OBP, but unless he either bulks up or Kevin Cash decides to try him out in a leadoff or the 2-hole of the lineup, he doesn't provide much value elsewhere. What do you think about these surging second half performances? Are you higher on any of these players after watching this? Are you still skeptical about a few of them? Were there any players in particular I could have added to this list? Let me know in the comments. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs down if you didn't, and if you're hungry for more fantasy stuff, help yourself and subscribe. I'm just getting started with this new chart topper series, so I hope you guys are truly enjoying it and learning from it as well. As always, big shout outs to Major League Baseball for its endless supply of player footage, and to Fangraphs.com, BooksBaseball.net, and BaseballSavant.com for offering the data I needed to pull my research together. See you guys again soon. God bless you all, and enjoy the rest of your day.